Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Customer Success Leadership Roundtable. I'm Andrew Marks, co-founder and architect of the Success Coaching Training Program, and I did not win the $1.5 billion Mega Millions lottery last night, so I am back with you for our monthly live CS Leadership Roundtable webcast today, talking about onboarding strategies that drive fast time to value. Now, this free learning event is brought to you by Success Coaching, the world leader in customer success professional development training. We've got a global community of more than now 25,000 students on our skills development platform, and we've issued more than 19,000 credentials. Our programs are available in a variety of formats, from self-paced online learning to virtual instructor-led boot camps. We've got a number of upcoming boot camps that still have seats available, and I'm going to tell you about them right now for a sec, including outcome-based selling, August 22nd to 23rd, led by my partner, Aaron Thompson. Our level 2 CCSM certification boot camp, led by yours truly, August 28th through 30th, and a level 1 CCSM certification boot camp, also taught by Aaron, on September 25th through 27th. We've also got a growing number of partners delivering some great content through our platform. We've just launched a new strategic conversations workshop led by the one, the only Bob London, starting on September 5th. We have a difficult customer conversations workshop led by Lindsey Eatough coming up on September 12th. Change management for customer success, a topic that we are likely going to touch on today, with Toby Lusich, September 18th through 20th, and data-driven decision-making led by Ed Powers, beginning September 29th. Tickets are also now available for our fall 12-week level 1, level 2 coaching programs delivered in partnership with the University of San Francisco Executive Education Certificate Program. Now, this is one of my absolute favorite things that I get to do, next to meeting with these people today and talking to y'all. I get to spend 12 weeks with up to 25 learners as we cover the key skills to be successful in customer-facing roles. We have a variety of special guests that join us, in-depth conversations about all of the topics covered during the program, thought-provoking exercises, and great conversations to help everyone connect the dots between the skills they're learning and how to incorporate them into their day-to-day world. You can save $250 when you register by September 1st for the fall programs. Now, whether it's self-paced learning, a boot camp, workshop, or a more gradual weekly coaching program, we've got quality customer-focused programs and formats that will suit the needs of anyone and everyone on your staff. So if you or any of your team members are looking to upgrade their customer-facing skills, we've got a program for that. And Ashley likely has dropped a link already into the chat with our program page and any coupons that we're offering right now. You can find out more about our online learnings and instructor-led programs and workshops at successcoaching.co. Okay, enough of that. For those of you who haven't participated in one of these events before, this is a live and unscripted discussion where we dig into a single topic relevant to customer success leadership. Regardless of the company that you work for, the scope of your role, the size of the customers that your teams deal with, we aim to pick topics that are going to be practical and useful to you. And the schedule for our upcoming events can also be found at successcoaching.co. Click on the events tab at the top of the page to find out more. Don't miss our next session in our Diversity in CS series on September 7th, all about driving inclusivity in CS. And our next CS Leadership Roundtable event is scheduled for September 13th, when we'll talk about the psychology of customer success. Now, a few housekeeping items before we get started. This webinar is recorded, and we'll be posting a replay along with a transcript on our website early next week. We will be taking questions during the webinar, so please don't be shy and use the Q&A button found at the bottom of your screen to ask your own question or upvote one that's already there. We answer questions based on upvotes. We're broadcasting on LinkedIn Live and have somebody monitoring that feed, so if you have questions, please post them, and Tracy will relay them to us. Also, please keep all commentary to the chat window and questions to the Q&A window. Now, there's a lot of thought leadership out there, along with a lot of theories about how to deliver customer success. In this series, we focus on practical, real-world advice, best practices, techniques, and shared experiences from those working with or leading customer success teams on a daily basis. And to do that, we invite 3 panelists to join me for a roundtable discussion. These are people who are great at their craft, and we ask them to share their experiences and their perspectives. So without further ado, I'd like our panelists to introduce themselves to y'all, talk a bit about who they are and what they do, and let's get started as usual in alphabetical order with Amber.
All right, thanks. Great introduction, Andrew. So excited to be here. This is a topic near and dear to my heart. My name is Amber Monroe. I have been in the healthcare industry for over 17 years. Been in tech for about 8, and really transitioned out of working in a hospital systems, worked directly for United Healthcare, I had a whole portfolio of hospital systems in the Midwest that I managed from a revenue cycle standpoint, and did that for several years. I have owned everything in customer operations, post-sales, from customer support to onboarding to implementation to customer success teams, retention, expansion, renewals, you name it. I've probably done it so far. And I have really excited to be here. I live in Central Florida. So super excited to be here. I saw some Floridians in there too. It's really hot right now. So hi to all my Floridians. Oh, you're muted, Andrew.
I'm not. Thank you very much. I'm usually the one that says, "Hey, you're muted." I love hearing those stories where somebody has leveraged their domain expertise to pivot into customer success. It's a great path to take, and it can be incredibly powerful. When you're trying to build and establish relationships with your customers, especially during the onboarding phase, which we're going to talk about in a moment. So thanks for making the time today. Lindsey, always great to see you. Good to have you back on the program.
Hi, Andrew. Hello, everybody. My name is Lindsey Eatough, but actually now Lindsey Lane, official new last name alert. So I'm here coming from Highlands, New Jersey. So all the other New Jerseyans, hello. And super excited to be here. The last, 10 plus years have been spent in some realm, whether it's called it or not, customer success, customer experience, and delivering from a post-sale perspective. It's a range, my experience is a range of large-scale global implementations of SAP in a more kind of waterfall, more traditional way of implementation, I'm on my 4th early stage scale up, actually, and running a customer experience team over at Isometric Technologies, which is an early stage company in the logistics and supply chain industry. So I'm really excited to be here. Customer experience, but especially onboarding is near and dear to my heart because it is the most important time of the relationship besides retention, if we know that. So really excited to be here. Thank you again, Andrew, for inviting me back. And I always share that my fun fact and hobby outside of customer success and what we do is competitive dog agility. So if anybody's interested in that, feel free to reach out. But really happy to be here and excited for today's conversation.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and I forgot to congratulate you for your wedding, for your nuptials, whatever.
It was last September. The name process.
I know it's been a while, but I don't think I've officially. When I see you in September, we'll be buying you a drink. As a matter of fact, didn't you have to leave the last time I saw you?
I did. I had to leave because I had to get to my wedding. Yes.
You got to get to your wedding. You left the CS 100 early to get to your wedding. Geez, your priorities are all messed up.
What have I done?
So when I see you in September, I'm going to buy you a wedding drink. Okay.
Perfect.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsey. And last but certainly not least, the member of our roundtable that is the farthest around the other side of the world from us. What time is it there, Shane?
Yeah, it's I had to look to 8:11.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, you're that much closer to the end of your day than we are. So, but Shane, welcome.
Thank you. And yeah, from here in Stockholm, but originally from New York. So neighbors to Lindsey and others. I grew up in the city, wanted to fly, lucky to get into Annapolis. And my career started as a naval officer, which is not that common, but had a pivot, as you can think of, like with Amber. Service has been consistent throughout my career. Various leadership roles, VPCS, Chief Customer Officer at big companies like Oracle, working with enterprise, but also small, medium through scale-ups, similar to Lindsey. Like once you get bit on the scale-up startups, you kind of go back. And what's interesting is that regardless of the product, especially as they get more capable, onboarding education is just becoming more and more critical. So the role that this plays and this conversation is something I was really looking forward to, especially since from habit formation and behavioral change, I also had a startup here in Stockholm that was focusing just on that. So a lot of lessons learned and painful lessons learned in psychology and why we don't build habits. You learn a lot, you know a lot, but you don't apply it. That's something similar to your intro, Andrew. And that's coming to what I'm doing now is taking methodology, what we call high performance learning journey, and technology to apply what you learn, because that's the only time something is gonna stick and be consistent throughout. So happy to be here. Free time, dad, 2 big kids. DEI is also something that's very important to me. Part of the advisory board of Women Engineer, and do volunteer other types of things that I try to give back to this amazing community because it feels so damn good to do so. So thanks for the invite and can't wait to get going.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, you and I came up similar paths, right? You were at Oracle as a engagement manager in PS when I was at Business Objects. But prior to that, I was at Scopus, got acquired by Siebel, and then they ended up back at Oracle. So it's been an interesting ride, and it was always kind of part of my ethos, even when on-prem professional services, that the customer's getting value. Right?
Yep.
It's so important to me. The customer's getting value, and we are going to talk about that. I think we're going to talk about that today. The focus of this panel is incredibly important to our field, right? It's all about onboarding customers, and it's the first step in their journey with us. Well, technically, it's not the first step. The whole selling process is the first step, but this is kind of the pretty close up there, right? Because it sets the foundation. It sets a foundation for trust, for engagement, for customer loyalty. Our initial interactions need to be strategic. They need to be personalized. They need to be deeply empathetic, because they're what builds the customer's relationship with us and our product. And if we don't build those relationships, we will not be successful. And strengthening these relationships is crucial for long-term business success. And in the subscription economy, we have to have a long-term relationship with our customers. The numbers don't work otherwise, especially when there are so many other great options out there available. Everybody talks about low barrier to entry in the subscription economy. Well, there's a low barrier to exit as well. And that's why successful onboarding is a must-have. It's not a luxury. It sets the tone. The customer's been made a promise of value, and it's now time for the rubber to hit the road and have what is generally a completely new team of players take the promises made and turn them into the reality of a return on the investment in time, effort, and money that the customer is making. But ideally, that value is being realized quickly, or the customer acknowledges that they see the value on the horizon quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Make sense? Are you all in agreement with me on this? Because if you think I'm full of shit, tell me. I hear that a lot too.
Not yet.
Okay.
She'll call you out if you want later.
It's on the horizon.
It's on the horizon, though, right? Yeah. So to start our discussion, let's talk about that first contact with our customers, that initial handoff from the people who made the promises now to the team that's about to make it into a reality. Let's talk through some of the techniques that you found most effective in setting that tone. Because in order for us to help them achieve value quickly, we need to set the right tone. We need to establish the right kind of back and forth, the right relationship. So what techniques have you found most effective in setting the tone for a successful customer relationship right at the onset of the onboarding process?
Yeah, I think I'll jump in. And what's interesting is that it's actually old school and low tech. I know enterprise, you may be able to afford to get the right people in the room. But even having that as a mission is also a step in the right direction, because that requires you to justify why they're in the room. And that's a reinforcement that, yes, this is important to them in their business. So SMB space, okay, maybe it's easier, you would think, but then you're talking about the owner is also the CFO, is also the CMO. Like, everyone's busy. So why should they be in the room? Well, it's reinforcing how transformative this software is to their business. And if they can't, then it should very well be, okay, what are the types of things that we are discussing again, and why should you be there? Always, why should you join? Because this is going to be, we talked about it prior to the call, that sometimes that the customers themselves are not aligned, and you have people that decided to buy, and you have another team that's going to implement. So from a relationship perspective, I still press low tech. If you can get in the room, do it, but get them in the room, even if it's a virtual room, because then you're going to have at least some of the nonverbals. And like you said, low tech, relational, you're going to do that when you see them rather than just over an email or potentially via proxy. So that's my start.
Go ahead, Lindsey.
Okay.
It's okay.
You go, Lindsey. I'll go after you.
Yeah.
Well, it ties to what Shane is saying, and Andrew knows this, I'm simple in the way that I think, but it's three categories that it dovetails really into what you're saying, Shane. Because one, if you don't have the right people in the room, then it doesn't make sense, and especially if this is their first interaction with the post-sale team, whether it's before the sales closed or if it's right after the sales closed. So my three things are: one, make the most of your time. So be specific, be measurable, be very clear and concise about what you want to say and what they get out of it. And if you need to get something, what is it? The second is don't waste their time. For some reason, all calendars are defaulted to 60 minutes these days. You can change that, by the way, to 30 minutes. Most of the time, the first interaction, you don't need a full hour. Maybe if there's something very specific you need to go through, but really thinking about how you're going to make the most of your time together. How are you not going to waste their time, because they are busy, like Shane's saying. And then three, do your homework. There's a lot of information gathered during the discovery and pre-sales process. And we'll probably talk about a handful of different ways and techniques that you can work with your pre-sales team, because that is different depending on the different type of company that you're in, like the different size, enterprise versus scale up versus how mature you are in your processes. But there's always information, because they wouldn't have bought it if they didn't find out enough information about the company. Going in not with a blank slate or blank stare of, oh, hi, I'm Lindsey, I know nothing about you. Going in with a little bit of your homework done builds trust immediately. So those would be my three.
Yeah, I was actually going to add to that too. So we didn't even prepare this, but you laid me right up for exactly what I'm going to say. So thank you. So I think too is to Lindsey's point about not wasting people's time, you have to demonstrate a level of value in that first moment, right? Like you have to establish a level of trust. You haven't earned their trust yet in that first session. So it's kind of like a little bit of building a rapport. And to Lindsey's point is doing your research ahead of time. I used HubSpot before, Salesforce, Zoho, whatever your CRM system looks like, and ensuring that you're capturing all the components of what that sales handoff, those fields or property values are in the system that tells you why are they buying, those are, I think to me, those are really, really important when you first go in, because the deer in the headlights look, right? Like not prepared walking into the call, that doesn't build you a level of trust either. And I think too, is you really have to set those expectations super early and often, right? I think if you've been in customer success long enough, you've definitely had to go through where you sit down with your sales rep and be like, what did you just sell to this customer? And you are responsible for actually delivering it. And so there's some aspect of, healthy friction, I like to call it, where you push back in certain areas. But then there's also this moment too of of being able to digest everything that you need from the conversation sales had with the client too. I think that's important as you go into this conversation too.
The birthplace of a checklist.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, I think it's the relationship and not being prepared and that it can be short. I like. What gives me pause is the harder we push on concrete, like what are we going to achieve? And if they can't articulate that, if they haven't in the past in the conversations, and if they can't during that session, even if you give an agenda, so that there should be pre-work for them as well, that it should align. You do the homework, you explain this is what we understand as your business. This is the challenges you face. This is what you hope to achieve. If those simple things can't be articulated, we have a problem.
Right.
So
we have a huge problem.
Yeah. So I think it's that's how we build trust and relationship, is being efficient and being specific. You said it, I think it was concrete, Lindsey. I mean, you're building a relationship. It should be great to meet you and I want to work with you. But in addition to the human and the kind of personality wise, I also love the way that you're pushing me to, that may be a tough goal in 6 months, and we'll get there and we'll track along the way. But at least we have a target rather than we're going to get better.
Right.
Well, let's go back to one of the first points that you made about having the right people in the room.
Yeah.
Right. So right out of the gate, I used to coach my team. I'm like, if we don't have the stakeholder, and let me take a step back. We were very clear with our sales team. This is what's going to happen when the customer transitions from sales to post-sales. These are the things that are going to need to happen. These are the people that need to be in the room. We even built slides that they can incorporate in their deck if they didn't want us to be on the call. We don't want you to be on the call. You're going to screw up our closing, whatever, right? I'm fine with that. Just make sure that you read this, right? And in that, it explains, here's what happens once the contract is signed. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. We're going to do this. This is why we need these particular people here. And what I used to coach my team on is if those people that are critical for that first call, for that first meeting, that were the ones, the decision makers who, made the decision to bring us in, have the vision of what we're trying to accomplish, don't show up to that kickoff call, those kickoff calls where all the other folks are brought in and are going to be necessary in order for us to get from, where we're at to a point of value as quickly as possible. Then you need to push back and say, we're going to have to cancel this. We're going to have to reschedule it, right? Because these people need to be here.
I think it was the recognizing that, especially the larger up you go, the more complicated. There's a question talking about multiple modules or capabilities of a product.
Yep.
If you don't have the stakeholders, the ones that are going to, oh, by the way, approve the renewal. If that's the first time you meet them, it's 12 months from now. That's also wrong. So this is setting you up for success to be able to know who they are, and maybe you're not going to get to know them very, very, very well, but you've made that initial connection. So I think if they're not willing, if it's not that important to them, and again, let's be realistic. How many layers up in the chain you're going to go? So they probably, wherever the budgetary responsibility is for that approval, they should be involved in some manner, because they traditionally are going to be involved in continuing or not.
Well, it's not just that, though. It's also you need to make sure that everybody on the team, everybody's rowing in the right direction. Everybody's aligned. I would rather find out on the kickoff call that there is misalignment, that some individual contributor farther down the chain that's going to be critical to driving adoption is like, hey, I don't understand why we're doing this. I want to find that out now. I want to find that out early, so that the key stakeholder can make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Good point. And I want to take it even a step further. Does your sales team actually know who needs to be on that call? Does your sales team, have you taken it all the way back? I know, right? My CSM team knows, my onboarding team knows, my implementation team knows they know the critical roles that need to be on that call to actually enable, right? But does the sales team know? And can we clearly define it for them? Because I think that's a component too is, hey, yeah, we closed a deal with, the CFO, but that CFO isn't going to be the onboarding team that implements this new tool, So I think that's an important piece as well. It's like if we can pull it all the way back to sales to scope out, hey, here's what we're doing in onboarding. Here's your next steps, right? Here's the key stakeholders that we're going to need in this call, this first initial call, and kind of tee it up for the onboarding team. So that way, when they get there, there's an element of alignment between your sales and customer success too.
Yeah, don't assume that they know.
Yeah.
There's three different tactics that have been helpful for like me in the past, at least, is one, we made a grid. So Andrew, you were talking about like a slide before, because I get it. Like, I love being in pre-sales calls, especially towards the end. I like to be a fact checker, myth buster towards the end. But we put together this grid that was like value areas of the product and the different stakeholders that we need on the customer side, and like made a matrix, comparing the two. So like, we can't unlock this value without this person, and here's why, and helping them tie the value of the product to the people that we need. And you'll see, especially when you get into like the larger enterprises, everybody has a different title or name or this, that, and the other, that we started describing instead of being like project manager. That can mean anything. And what happens is if you have like four roles that you need, they put the same name in all of them. They're like, did it. But when we started to put descriptions in, they understood the why versus the title. In another scenario, we had issues getting the stakeholders to come to the kickoff call because it was after the sale. I signed it. Go. I'm going to introduce you to John, who's going to be the person that runs this, and I'm going to talk to you in 12 months. We put it before the deal got signed. We started moving up our kickoff. We did it as almost like a complimentary service when we made them feel very special, that we were willing to kind of invest time before the deal was signed. Again, it was 90 to 95%. They were probably redlining or whatnot, but because they still have skin in the game at that point of the cycle, there was usually more likelihood that they would attend. So that was something that was super helpful. And I know that we were talking about this in the pre-call, and Shane, you and I were talking about some like boundaries with sales that you can set. You can do that for a bit to drive behavior, and then say that you're going to not do that later. Or there's certain tiers of test customers you're willing to do something like that for, or while you're figuring out internal processes and handoffs. So it's a tactic that can be used. I had a third thing, but I can't remember what it was. So I'll just write these things down.
I love that you threw out Mythbusters though. When we have a drink, I got to tell you about my experience with Mythbusters.
Yes.
But getting on that, so get to know. I know that this is a loaded topic, but after being on the sales side, I know, Andrew, you spent that time as well. This is not like for them or for us. This is us on the CS side of being handed to it. But that I think that knowledge, especially the larger, more I would say complicated, the bigger the deal, there is awareness of that. The influence mapping is done, the account, the relationship, but you have to have that, because you'll lose the deal if you don't understand that. And yes, there could be a disconnect between the implementation, but oh, by the way, maybe you have 10 modules, you sold one. Like, so depending on the very near future of that account over the next year, not just the renewal, but an expansion perspective, there's tons of reasons why both of you should have a very clear idea who the organization is and how they are motivated to make this successful. So just a challenge that visibility, I think, is good for both sides if they understand what they benefit from. But that's great.
You need this. You need this farther along in the journey as well, right? It's not just about the onboarding, right? You can't just sit there and get them on board and assume they understand the value, right? And if you can connect the value that you are providing to some overarching corporate objective, right? Which is likely what drove the purchase, what drove the investment. Now you're sitting there and you're connecting the dots and you're saying, hey, by the way, you achieved that company objective last year because we were able to implement this thing. We were able to get you to this point of value. And I know that because we've tied, what those objectives are to each of these key stakeholders that have brought us in. And that is something that you need to constantly be reminding them of during your business reviews.
I remembered my third thing, Andrew.
Yes, ma'am.
It's a good one too, so I'll say it. Normally I would just let her keep going. But I think, Shane, you were talking about, and Amber, you too, of like getting the right people there. And sometimes the executives don't want to come in, or, sometimes they'll see, oh dear, this is the first call, and now I'm going to be on a weekly call with them until it stood up, and then there's this pushback that kind of happens in the call, because they're worried. Everybody's worried about time, right? In this hybrid world as well, there's more meetings, etc. Something that we do is we ask how they communicate, and then draw a line in the sand around cadence as well. It's even more than like your typical. Internally, we'll have like a grid that says, here are the main touches, here are the touches with the key stakeholders, and then your day-to-day contacts. Here's different reporting, here's insights we can send. But then on a monthly, weekly, quarterly, monthly level, how do we send it? We can just send an email. Maybe they're in Slack or Teams with us, or, figure out how they communicate internally, and also what's their reporting structure like? Because at the end of the day, the reasons why the person that signed it and their role, they're wanting to maintain their role, they're maybe here, you know what I mean? They're really thinking about revenue. But if it's a middle manager, especially that's managing the project, they're trying to look good and get promoted, right? So how can you help them do that? And understanding how the company internally communicates, what they prefer, and setting that tone kind of in that first call as well at the end, and saying like, here's the cadence of how we want to interact with you. Here's the options. I think you can also set a really nice tone and also get people to show up when you want them to, because they don't think you're going to do it too often, or without purpose.
Well, Amber, you mentioned, you were talking about basically a best practice. Make sure sales understands.
Yeah.
Right. Make sure everybody understands what's expected. And that has, going back to my on-prem days,
Stop right
we always
there.
did that. Hey, here's what to expect. Right. We made it very clear. We spelled it out.
Yeah.
I need you here for this, and this is the reason why, and this is the value that we're going to get as a team. And at the end of the day, by doing this for us, we're going to help you look like the smartest person at your company, because we're going to actually get you to a point of value quickly.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're not there, then that is going to cause problems. Right. And to your point, Lindsey, we will engage with you. This is how much we need to engage with you initially. And then you're just an escalation point. Or we can communicate with you in whatever cadence makes the most sense, that you're going to be the most comfortable with. Is that a monthly status report? Is it a weekly 15-minute stand-up? Whatever works for you. So we've established that we got to get the right people in the room, right? That's right out of the gate. We got to get the right information. We got to have a smooth handoff, right? So we're not showing up looking like a deer in headlights, because that is not a great way that's not a good look to start a relationship. So now let's talk about, let's talk about some onboarding experience examples that maybe you have, where your team has moved a customer through. I don't want to talk about the ones we'd rather forget about, although we should probably touch on those, but because we learn so much from our mistakes and our failures. But let's talk about, I want you to think about onboarding experiences done right, and how that, how you approach that, how you got to that point of value as quickly as possible, and how you communicated that value to your customer.
I'll start. So most of my experience, customer success teams have been onboarding SMB mid-market type customers. So this is kind of, I've had to play in the sand from very basic, we just hop on a call. There's no slide deck. We're just winging it. We've got a Word document with a checklist of like the things we need to do, to getting more sophisticated in some of our processes. So I'd say too, one of the things that I've seen work in a couple organizations I've worked in is just initially having those nice kickoff emails, right? So but after sales, after the deals close, there's some sort of automatic notification that goes out via email. Very simple, something very easy that you can do instead of like your onboarding team sending out those manually. And I've worked in many organizations that's the approach. We're just, we've got maybe a smaller volume of customers, and maybe we're in a high growth phase, and now we're having bottlenecks in onboarding because we are experiencing a lot of customers and we don't have a lot of scalable processes in place. So we have to think quickly on our feet on what we need to do. And so those kickoff emails are really important. And I think there's ways to create some human component to those emails as well. That isn't like this full list of like, here's all the things to expect in your onboarding experience. And this is like big, long, book. And then you look at it and you're the customer and you're like, oh my God, I don't even want to even start, I don't even want to start this process because now it's complex and it's going to take a lot of my time. And sales told me this was going to be super easy and I wasn't going to have to do it, that, it was going to be super fast and could be hands off or whatever. So for me, like, I think that's something very simple that if you're working in smaller type organizations, or that are experiencing a phase of high growth too, I think that's something that you can do very quickly. You can even embed, specific CSM type emails inside to give that human component. That's one thing I've done with a customer success team I had is, they each had a portfolio of customers, and we did recorded videos. We just sat there, a very short recorded video. We gave them kind of a script, but we also here's the border of the script. We didn't want it to be canned where they couldn't give who they were as a person, which is why they were hired. And so we allowed them to kind of go off script a little bit and let customers know who they are as a person. And I think we got a lot of feedback on that, specifically the embedded customer success videos, as hey, that was really a nice touch. And that way, when they showed up to that first call, they kind of already knew who their CSM was because they watched that video. If they
I like that keeping it simple, setting expectations. Yeah. I love the Loom video type things, those short little, right? But you're right. Got to keep them simple. You can't be writing War and Peace in an email. And even if you don't have the luxury of having some sort of some sort of marketing automation system to be able to send these things out, just having a bunch of copy in a Google Doc and then just copy and pasting it and personalizing it still is going to save you a heck of a lot of time, even if you've got a large book of business, for sure. Lindsey, Shane, what about you?
I can go. I've lived a lot on the enterprise, large customer, white glove type side. So Andrew, when you're asking about an onboarding that went successfully and why, one just jumped to my head mainly because I loved working with my counterpart on the customer side. I was brought in early before the sale was closed. We were a bit early in our business, and it was one of the top 5 customers that we had sold, a pretty large financial institution in the United States. And the target was to get to 30,000 active users, or as many as we can. And we knew in the sale that we were going to get a 500 person pilot, and we needed to essentially get 100% usage of those 500 within 6 months or so to really drive the kind of expansion past the pilot and use that early momentum. In this example itself, I think the reason it sticks out in my mind is because we were partners. Now, I was not a vendor. She was someone that was working with all of the products for the like design part of the organization within that company. And so she was working with like a lot of other what she would call tools, but she looked at working with me as more of a partner to achieve their goals as an organization versus another thing to teach people how to log into. And so I created a bunch of material for her that she then presented to the end user. So as a very much so a train the trainer, but it wasn't just the end users. It was also the leadership team, the key state, like, so the whole conversation that we were just having, it was probably one of the best examples I've had of, I gave her the content and she presented to the team.
You made her look like the best. You made her look like the smartest person there.
Oh,
right?
yeah. Even in the kickoff call, she sounded like this innovator that was going to use this technology to solve business problems that they had. And we put it in their language within the company because large enterprises have a very specific language that they use that sounds like it's innate within the company. And her success was my success, you know, and in 6 months we had, I think, 496 active users in the platform of the 500, which was, in all of the different things I've done, probably like the most successful, but it was because she was so bought in that you would have thought she was one of our employees, which is a really cool thing to say. Again, that's much different than maybe if you're looking at SMB or mid-market. It's hard. I think it's challenging to do, but there's tactics I think that you can do in any of the levels, like what you were just saying, Amber, creating videos. So helpful because they can go and adapt it and organize them into a library and use those to educate and be the person. So just trying to get that person to see you as a partner and then also be the speaker. A lot of times, even in business reviews, for some reason, we think that we as the SaaS product need to be the one speaking all of the time during a business review or during etc. I try to speak as little as possible, which is ironic for Andrew, right? For
so ironic.
But I love when you get the customer to present to themselves or bring in a power user, or if they're launching a product. I don't want emails coming from me because I already drive very needy customers. I don't need to like do more things to drive that. So that was an example that came to mind to talk about a little bit about enterprise, but really, yeah.
Well, you want to, and we're gonna have to jump to questions here soon, but I mean, at the end of the day, you want to drive fast time to value. You need to find people like that, right? Yeah. And you need to check your ego at the door because this is not about you. This is about them. And that was a tactic that I successfully used over and over and over again in my career. Let's find those power users. Let's find those fans. Let's over-index on providing them with information, with data, with training. And basically take the approach that how can I help you get promoted? How can I elevate you in the eyes of your leadership? And one of my larger customers back in the day when I was at Business Objects, Lindsey, also happened to be a very large financial institution, one of the largest in the country, or used to be. And it was all about training the fans, training the power users. And then they would go ahead and not only would they train everybody else in their organization, but we also worked with them to schedule lunch and learns with other divisions within the company, and they sold for us. Yep. They helped our expand in a land and expand. They helped the expansion, right? And you mentioned, Shane, modules. So we had at Business Objects, we had lots of different pieces of business objects. So it was that type of strategy that allowed us not only to expand that particular product into other areas of this financial institution, but also additional pieces of our suite into different areas as well. And there is no better person to sell for you than your customer.
Yeah. So I have to build on it. It was said, both Lindsey and Amber, I know you reinforced it. You need the energy and the drive. They need to understand how it benefits them. So that's clear. We need to dig into that. But the executive sponsorship, so you can have someone that loves you, but doesn't have the influence necessary to drive this through. And that was the first question we had about getting the people in the room, or I'll just do this room. They need to be involved. They need to tie what we're doing to their business to make, maybe they're not going to get a promotion, but they still need to look good. They still need to justify their existence. And especially with times like these. So I just wanted to put that in there again. I think it feels good. It's fun to work with someone else and empower them. It's trickier when I somehow have to build a relationship as well. They need to look good to their boss and potentially other leaders. Mm-hmm. And it's difficult to build that connection. So executive sponsorship throughout, it starts early on, and we have to spend time on that and be deliberate, because it could fall flat, or you lose. Well,
and that's where that connecting the dots between what you're doing and some overarching business objective, whether that objective is tied directly to the person that you're dealing with or tied to their boss or their boss's boss. Understanding that connection is super important, so that at least, even if you're not the one communicating it directly to that stakeholder, the person you're dealing with or their boss or their boss's boss understands the value that has been achieved.
Yes.
Right?
Again and again and again.
Yeah, let's get to some questions. Just a reminder to everybody, we will go until 15 past the hour. Now, we've talked a lot about a lot of different stuff, and we haven't even scratched the surface. Actually, we probably could have done a 3-hour webinar, but nobody's got time for that. But let's answer some of these questions, though. Our first question comes from anonymous attendee. Anonymous, thanks for joining us. Anonymous would like to know how to set up measurable outcomes or goals the customer wants to achieve on onboarding calls. Usually these goals are discussed, but they are very subjective. How to divide these goals into measurable milestones. So Shane, looks like you want to jump in on this one first. I also have something to add, depending on what you say, but go for it, Shane.
Yeah, the exercise, I'll just say this, I don't have, it's hard, especially with SaaS, you're covering many different industries. So you're not going to be an expert in each one, and you can't be that trusted advisor very quickly. But you can ask some basic questions. And the point is the discussion alone, to take it could be their annual report, and it's going to have some high-level objectives about growth, about retention, about customer experience. Pick one. Think about it like an OKR experience. Pick something that you're contributing to it, whether it's indirectly or direct. Hopefully it's directly, hopefully it's measurable. And come up with, okay, you're not sure where you are? Fine, let's, under the time that we're working together, try to ask others that may be able to give you some indication of how you're doing. Because if you don't measure, how do you know you improved? And if you don't know where you left from, how do you know that you've improved? So the numbers are critical. And yes, they could be subjective, but I guarantee you there's data somewhere. It just, they may not have been able to get it. They haven't understood why they need it. So help them.
Someone does. Yes. Someone does. Right? Someone understands the value that you're bringing to the table. And you just need to ask the right discovery questions to uncover that. But somebody understands it. Every purchase that a company makes, they don't just spend money to spend money. They're doing it to get a return. So you have to quantify that return. And that return is not subjective. You're not going to the CFO and saying, I think we should buy this because it feels good. Okay? I guarantee it. Every person, whether you got to see, we're a tiny company. We don't have a CFO. Everything we spend, we think about, okay, what's the return on this investment?
An example of there's the end result, you say growth sales. Okay. There could be a year sales cycle. I mean, Lindsey was talking about the enterprise. Some of them are 2, depending on the size. So there's leading indicators. Let's talk about market. Are there more leads? What's the quality of the leads? Like there's many, it's not just the close. There's the conversions between the phases. So the conversation to understand their business also positions you. And hopefully there's going to be others that you're working with that are similar. Talk to the CSMs. Find ones that could even join the call and ask again, how do you measure success here? Because again, they bought for a reason. They signed the contract. So there must have been some kind of ROI. There must have been some impact to the business. Otherwise, they're not going to buy it.
Yeah, I was going to say too, to add to that, always used to have a sales question that got asked, during the call is, what does success look like? If you were to, buy with us today and purchase today, and your team implemented the product and tool, what would that look like for you? What would it be that we achieved success here? And sales was required. It was a required property. They had to add it in the CRM. And it gave context too for the next phase of the customer's journey too. So when you hop on the call, hey, so success looks like this for you. Let me set that expectation and make sure we're on the same page. Okay, now let's talk about how do we measure that, right? Because you might have given some subjective answer of what success looks like, but my job is to make sure I get really granular, very specific, and then I measure against that to make sure that you're achieving that.
Yeah, we talk about fast time to value. We have to define what value is.
Yeah.
What is value to you? Everybody knows what value is. It's not subjective. Right? You want to go out and buy a sports car because you're having a midlife crisis. That's subjective. It makes me feel good. Okay. Right.
Feels good. It feels good, I'm sure, for that person.
Yeah. Right. Maybe that's okay. Maybe that's okay to be subjective. But when you're a business investing in another business, there is an ROI. And saying that you can't get that means that you're not asking the right question. All right. Awesome. Shane, if you could hit the done button on that question. Thank you, Anonymous, wherever you are, whoever you may be. Daniel asks, any strategies for bringing a client back in when you're in the middle of onboarding and they ghost you for the next call, even after various emails, calls to voicemail, or maybe more like next steps? Amber, you got something you want to jump in on this?
Yeah, just having so much experience in SMB and mid-market, this happens a lot, especially in the healthcare industry too. So I work kind of in post-acute care, which is kind of like the home care space, senior living facilities. They experience a lot of turnover in the office. So there's oftentimes they'll purchase software, and then the person that's supposed to be part of the onboarding process leaves and joins another agency. So I used to have to experience this all the time with our team. And I would tell you, like, the most successful strategies we put in place is setting parameters for how often you will try to engage that customer, right? So if you have a certain amount of touch points, you don't want it to go into an abyss of, like, your onboarding specialist is like 5 months down the road and like bringing to your attention, like, I can't get this customer to re-engage with me. And then you got all these like straggling other customers that are following behind. You want to set some clear parameters specifically for your team too, to make sure that they understand like the bounds of what a successful engagement would look like too. And make sure you set boundaries for touch points. Hey, like, what does that look like? Is it, 3 touch points via email and 4 phone calls? Is it, set some sort of boundary, and you might have to play with it too. It might be a certain amount of touch points. And then at times it could be, calls to the office. We would get all sorts of structures to try to find who the right person is, because when that person leaves, obviously there's a failure point, right? Because we can't implement a product if we don't have the right key stakeholder, which is kind of goes back to key stakeholders too, is having an ability to access more than just one person too. So you don't have that failure point during onboarding. So I think that's also really important. But I would say too, in this instance, when we would have a segment of customers that would be disengaged, where maybe we had multiple points of contact that we were trying to reach out to, or we were calling, a lot of times we would put them into a segment that was essentially a non-responsive segment, which would drive only digital touches. So it would be only digital touches. It would kind of move your onboarding specialist into focusing on different areas of the business, with onboarding the accounts that are super engaged. And we wouldn't spend too much time. We would give those, and maybe they are disengaged. There could be a lot of reasons, but I know sometimes too, in my experience, there were disengaged accounts that were very tech savvy and didn't need our support, right? So they utilized knowledge-based resources. They utilized all the tools and resources we had, and they're like, I don't really need you. I got this. And so we would also track user behavior in the tool too. And if we notice that, then there were certain segments that we would push them into that would drive different touch points.
Somebody's got to care. There's got to be somebody, whether it's the original stakeholder, the person who signed it. If you feel that it's not moving along, I mean, I would assume that if you had a tech savvy customer, you'd at least see that they were making some sort of progress. Something was getting done, right? But if somebody's ghosting you and it's preventing you from helping the customer get to that next stage in achieving value, and you've tried everything you can to re-engage with that person, guess what? This is the time to escalate. This is where you use that escalation process, right, Lindsey?
Yeah. And I think prior to the escalation is, and you're kind of just saying it, Andrew, and you're saying it, Amber, is how can you get to the point of understanding why? So the why, like, because there's
that's what Shane's all excited about.
Happen, right, Shane? One, they're really active. They're smart. They don't need you. Okay, fantastic. You could kind of make them need you too. Like, I'm sure they don't know everything about it yet, but also you might have a large book of business, put them on like some sort of digital campaign and say, hey, were we meeting too much? Like, is that what was going on? It's just that why is just so important. I don't think I have to kind of go deeper on that, because you can escalate, sure, but there could be a deeper reason. Like, so we had an instance where someone wasn't responding, and we're like, what? And we're meeting with the rest of the team too. He was just a decision maker. So we're like, this is odd. This guy normally answers. He had a personal thing that happened. Like, it wasn't the why had nothing to do with us. And he did get back to us when he could. It was for like a medical reason, so really figuring out that why early and then going from there. But absolutely, Andrew, escalate earlier than later, and making sure your team, if you are a manager, feels comfortable escalating to you and say, escalate to me. Whenever something happens, tell me now instead of waiting a couple weeks. And then you can help them understand, does it need to go up more or not? Right? Like, that's your role as the manager too.
Well, and I also think it justifies the reasoning for having multiple contacts in an account as well. Right. So you can go and, hey, what happened to Shane? Shane went totally dark on me. Oh, yeah, he fell off his mountain bike and he's in the hospital. Right. I mean, you got to have you've got to have multiple contacts and not be afraid to go reach out to them. Sorry, Shane, go ahead. I'm sorry to hear about your bike crash.
Yeah, I'm recovering, so thanks. We had instances where we had drop-offs, and a lot of our churn was from first-year customers, which is a whole hole in your head, all the acquisition costs, then you end up losing them. And then we built out the curriculum and thought that was sufficient and process and kind of, again, thought I was addressing the problem. It turned out that since the expectations weren't done in the beginning, which is the beginning of our call, the individuals were overwhelmed because they knew the old product and they had a new product to learn. And we didn't do a good enough job to outline, okay, how is this going to be done practically? What hours of the day? How much of time? How does this person prioritize this work? So it was long before the escalation or using an LMS or all these other things that go into why they're leaving. It was the fact that I didn't set the expectations in the beginning. They didn't realize it was going to take this much time. So then we clarified that. And we also included their boss and potentially their boss to say, this is going to take this much time. So you're getting the escalation a little bit. Again, not all of them are like that, but that was a lesson a painful lesson to address a problem that I didn't really understand the root cause to.
Well, and Shane, you're like, I think that's like the best realization to have, right? Of you're doing it over and over and over again. So you know the process in and out. It's like when you do a demo and you've been demoing or training people on a product for 12 months. And then you realize, oh, I started skipping things, or I don't as thoroughly explain as I used to, because you do it all the time. This is their first and potentially only time doing the thing. Yeah, it's huge.
Great point.
Awesome. Daniel, thank you for the question. Ankita. Hope I pronounced that right, Ankita. Apologies if not. Ankita asks, creating an onboarding sequence for a SaaS product with multiple products, various features within each, different customer types, and multiple user permissions. How do you start? Looks like Lindsey, you want to take that one on.
Yeah, I've been in this situation before, and I'd love to hear what what the others have to say. But for this specifically, I would actually recommend writing out all the permutations of products, features, customer type. It might actually seem tedious, but getting down into the detail of a big list of like, these are all the scenarios that could happen, and almost stack rank them. Because what you might actually find is that onboarding sequences, you're going to find commonalities and themes across how you want to treat. And maybe as you're going through that exercise and doing that exercise, maybe in a workshop format with multiple people on the team. Big fan of workshops. Andrew knows this. I facilitate workshops all the time. But it's once you get down to the detail, then you can see where there's different opportunities of roll-ups. Is it by customer type? Is it by types of users? Is it by product feature combinations, because you can train them in the same way? But I'd also urge you to think about why they would use the product. So instead of thinking from a product-led perspective, which we're all product and customer-led, I would think about what is the use case. Yeah. I've been big on business process flows now within my current company. But what are the main uses that they're going to use your product for? And think about the onboarding sequences from that perspective, and then where your products and features within, and then the access roles underneath. You might need to write out flows and kind of draw it out, but you might surprise yourself of there. Maybe there's 5. And also remember the 80-20 rule. You might not need an onboarding sequence for every single thing. And that's where your product team can help in terms of pulling some usage data for you as well, once you come up with all the permutations.
I'm going to disagree with you. I'm going to disagree with you, so don't get mad. I disagree with you on the order on that. I love that idea, but I would do the use case one first.
Yeah.
Right? I would say, okay, what are the most common? Mm-hmm. Now it also depends on where you're at in the evolution of your company. Right. If you got 5 customers, you might not know all the different use cases, but you could look at those 5 customers and say, what are our most? There's got to be some commonality here, right? Mm-hmm. And then applying the 80-20 rule. Okay, now let's figure out this matrix, right? To figure out how it would what makes the most sense from an onboarding perspective, but your approach. Right. Let's have a brainstorming session, and then let's do some mind mapping and figure out what it's going to take. Anybody else want to add to?
I was chomping at the bit until you got to it, Lindsey, regarding the use case tasks. Like I've been into companies that our vocabulary, the acronyms, like we're so product centric, and then we build a knowledge base with that mindset. Yeah. Like watch the customer use it. You'll have the use cases you think, and there's going to be others. I guarantee it. So yes, it requires effort, and yes, I love the approach that you described. It's to just brainstorm through it, but constantly use the feedback on because that's how do you. The only other addition would be complexity. So sometimes from a momentum, psychological perspective, even if it's simple and low value, I feel good about myself because I learned something and I've proven I've shown I can do it. Then I'm going to do something more complicated. So don't, just because it's critical to their business, maybe you don't start there, because that could be, maybe they're worried about making a mistake. They don't want to press the commit button. So have those things in mind when you start building out these both use cases, training, both from a module perspective, but also from a business process perspective that could hopefully go across module.
For sure.
All right. Next question comes from Anonymous again. Anonymous asks, in our line of work, outbound marketing, we need our clients to know about their ideal customer profile personas as we help them develop initial campaigns. We are recently revamping our onboarding process, particularly the sales to CS gap that exists. Long story short, how much pre-work is okay to give the client, or is it better to just provide them an overview of what you can expect, what we need, you to be prepared to discuss during onboarding? Shane, you want to jump in on this?
Do you? I don't know if I took one already. Amber, do you want to grab this and then
Sure.
If Amber, you got something to say on this one?
Yeah,
put you on the spot, but I've been flapping my gums, so
I was like, great. I wasn't ready, but okay, I'll get ready. No, just kidding.
no,
Wow.
no, I'll start then. I'll start.
No, I got it. No, I think this is a really good question. And actually when you were reading it, I was kind of thinking of how I would respond to this too. I think to earlier, Shane kind of mentioned something is, even though something might be low value, there is this sense of like completion that drives them to something that could be more complex. So for me, I personally prefer the minimum amount of pre-work that's necessary, what is actually expected and needed, and make sure you might write out and say, oh, these are all nice to haves, but you need to get down to like, I need to have these 5 pieces of data points, and I need them specifically from the customer because I cannot get them from any place else. And I think you have to really clearly define that so you don't end up dropping or dumping this huge volume of pre-work that stops them from they'll initially lose their momentum and excitement from working with you, right? You got the high of sales and they're super excited to work with you. And then they see this big, massive pre-work spreadsheet that they have to fill out. It's like down, like they're just initially, a level of disengagement, then it's like overwhelmedness. And there's a whole lot of things that happen psychologically too, before that you can like pull them out of that trough, I would say. And so for me, I would think it's define what your needs to have versus your nice to haves. And then the nice to haves based on the experience you have with the client too. Maybe there's some element you can pull out some of those nice to have pieces.
I think it's fantastic, and I'm glad that I had you start. Differentiate, because my immediate reaction is we as a CS, we need to go beyond to drive the loyalty, the expansion, having like Lindsey's customer, go on the roof and yell and tattoo our names, and that goes beyond the technology and the platform. It goes to some of the things that we're talking about here. Is like, how do they become a better marketer? That has very little to do with the technology. So delineating very clearly what is mandatory. But I like to lift the curtain or challenge and say, working with us, you're going to be a better marketer. It's not going to be you're going to be great at HubSpot. You're going to blow people away. And that's where I think I would like to give a glimpse of some of the challenging questions that we would like to ask or learn. It shows that they're interested, and then maybe give an example. Like, here's another company roughly in your sphere, and these are the types of things that they're doing. So it's not just pummel them with questions. That's disheartening. But I do like to hopefully excite them about the path that they're on and what they're going to learn.
Well, it needs to be a conversation, not an interrogation.
Right?
Yeah.
I feel like when I read this question, I kept seeing the sales to CS gap, that it kept like bringing me to that part of the question than like the later one. My rule is always going to be meet a customer where they're at, but also everybody has different styles in customer success. So I love what Amber, you were saying of, have a list, nice to have, needs to have, and then Shane, you're saying also, but like give examples and the why of like why you're asking these questions so they can become a conversation. So you're not like drilling them with questions, but maybe you can group the questions into themes. Okay, this is to this value area. Here's why we have to ask these questions. Talk to me now. And then kind of bucket it. But the meet them where they're at perspective is you can have that framework and then ask the salesperson before, do they like filling stuff out? Some people love emailing.
Yeah.
Some people love that stuff. So if you like to fill out a pre-work, give them the pre-work. like wait till it's live, because, and I think that's one of the value points of that interaction, and especially, I guess it's more enterprise, but across the board, having that relationship with your counterpart to say, What do they like? Do they like interacting in that way? Are they going to find it as a waste of their time for me to fire questions at them if I can even beforehand, hey, I'm going to ask you this for these reasons. You can either send me a note about it or we'll discuss it live. Yeah. But regardless, this is the information we need to make you successful like these people. Quote, quote, quote. And so you can kind of play with that a little bit. But when I was looking at that sales to CS gap, there was an activity just from I love tactics in these calls of like, what's something you could go do right after this that might be able to help you with your problem. But the sales to CX gap, we had a huge problem at one point with the sales and CS team. The AEs were like, stop throwing that over the fence to us. And the CS team were like, they don't care. So I come from my previous company is a company called Mural, which is all about digital collaboration and visual thinking. And I brought the two teams together and we did persona maps of each other. And I said, you are going to understand why this person is the way they are. And we also met manager and manager to understand what was motivating the other team member to do those behaviors. You might have a gap because of how you're motivating those different personas within your company to do their job and what their goals are. They were trying to close quick and they didn't care what was happening because their quotas and their expectations were too high and too challenging. So the quality wasn't there because it was quantity that was being driven. So, and then that persona map of each other made them think about in a different way of like, oh, you're in sales because, you want to make some money. I get it. Like, and you operate in a different way. You like when something starts and ends. Great. Okay. CS, what do you care about? So that's a little activity you could do to have them get some empathy towards one another.
It was amazing how my relationship with sales changed my team's relationship with sales changed when we did that type of exercise, the empathy mapping. Mm-hmm. I want you to, it's something that anybody in customer success should be quite capable of doing because we need to be employing empathy every time we're dealing with our customers. Right? When you're dealing with internal teams, it's the same thing. Right? Empathize with the people you're dealing with. Oh, product isn't answering me. Product isn't paying attention. Well, okay, let's think about it from what your asks are from product's perspective. Right? Yeah, they're getting bombarded constantly with requests. Right? They've got to sit there and try and figure out how to prioritize. I mean, I would sit there and I'd go through that with my team. I'm like, the reason why you guys are hitting brick walls with some of these other team members is because you're not thinking about it from their perspective.
That's a panel, Andrew.
Right. And I think got started. I think too is as a leader of CS too, I think it's important that you have really strong rapport with your sales leader as well. And so you can bring forward these types of discussions and conversations. I've had really, really exceptional sales leaders that I've worked with that help close those gaps. Hey, here's what the team's bringing me. Here's what and when you have a very customer-centric sales leader that you work with, it makes such a huge difference. It's not necessarily grow at all cost. It's truly about the experience of the customer. And it's such a enlightening thing to be involved in an organization where a sales leader it has that customer-centric lens and perspective too, because that helps you create and repair those gaps, right? Bridge those gaps and find opportunities and ways. And sometimes too, I've seen effective is pulling in kind of tactics, Lindsey, pulling in, maybe like one of your strong CSMs, one of your strong sales, bringing them together to talk about, hey, let's get down to, it doesn't even have to be at the leadership level, right? Get down to the individual contributors that are in the day-to-day and get them talking with each other and get them motivated and incentivized to actually bring about change and influence change within their teams too, because I think that will gain a level of buy-in for that collaboration and closing that gap too.
I want that kind of buy-in and this is going to sound really, I'm going to get a bunch of people that are probably going to say you're freaking nuts, but have CS report up under the CRO and have the CRO comped on NRR. Okay, you want to drive collaboration? That's how you do it. Okay, because money motivates, money talks, bullshit walks. And with that, unfortunately, we're at the end. I think we need to have another one. We got to have a part 2.
Hell
Right?
yeah.
I mean, heck yeah.
Let's get started.
And there are 10 really beefy
I am
additional
in.
questions here. So, but yeah, we're at the end of our time for today. I think it was a great conversation. But it's not what I think, it's what all of you think. So please let us know by posting your feedback on LinkedIn and tagging either myself, our guests, or Success Coaching. I want to thank our guests for spending the time with us and for the ideas, the thoughts, the insights, and the best practices that you shared. Thank you all. One final note, great CS leaders know that they don't have all the answers, but they know where to get them. That's why we created the CS Leadership Roundtable, to harness the knowledge and experience of the entire community to help improve everyone. We hope to see you again at our next event on September 13th, once again, when we'll be discussing the psychology of customer success. Until then, make sure to make space for yourself and your mindset every single day, and have a great rest of your week and month, everybody. See you soon.